Podcast with Phil Zito, episode 402. Hey folks, Phil Zito here, and welcome to episode 402 of the Smart Buildings Academy podcast. In this episode, we are going to be diving into the topic of how to perform retrofit site audits. So we're going to be going and taking a look at how to perform these retrofit site audits. We're going to be going through a little presentation I put together. Today is going to be a little different for those of you listening to the podcast in about an hour. So if you're listening on iTunes or somewhere where you can't see stuff, in about an hour, this presentation will be posted at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/402. Once again, that is podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/402. And for those of you who are going to be at the ASHRAE, or don't call it ASHRAE because they get upset, the AHR Expo, we will be there next week at booth Bravo Charlie 1824. So hope to see you at booth Bravo Charlie 1824. All right, let's dive in. Okay, so I'm just going to make sure you can still hear me. We're doing good. All right, so how do you do a site audit on a retrofit site? Because as I made the case on Wednesday's podcast, I believe we're entering a retrofit market. As part of a retrofit, one of the things you have to do is a site audit. So site audits are going to be really important for you to be able to execute your retrofit projects. So what we're going to cover in this presentation is going to be what a retrofit site audit is, and more importantly, what it isn't, how to perform a retrofit site audit, the exact steps you need to do on every retrofit site audit, and then live question and answer. So I wrote this presentation instead of my team, so there may be spelling errors and grammar errors. So forgive me for that. I just put it together this morning. All right, so retrofit site audit. What is a retrofit site audit? Like, what is the difference? Because we've got energy audits, we've got measurement and verification audits, you got IT audits, all sorts of stuff. Well, a retrofit site audit, how I look at it, is taking place in either one of two scenarios. Hopefully it's taking place before you've created your estimate, before you have proposed and signed a scope of work and a contract with the customer. That's what I hope is happening. The reality of things, being a former service person, being a former ops person, I understand that a lot of times we don't even get invited to do a site audit until after a contract's been signed. It's a little scary, but it is the reality. So we're going to just paint out what you should do. Whether this is happening before a contract or after a contract is irrelevant for this conversation. So a retrofit site audit, it exists for the purpose of conducting a retrofit, not for an energy project, not for M&V, although those may be forms of retrofit. This is purely for the retrofit. This is taking the as-is framework and turning it into a to-be framework. And I already see our first spelling error. Therefore, everything we will gather will be to support the retrofit, right? So here are the steps of the retrofit audit process. We're going to define the purpose of the retrofit. I'm going to take you through a framework on how to do that. We're going to decide what is needed to meet that purpose. We're going to discover the state of those needs, and we're going to identify what challenges and risks exist. All right, so first things first, let's define the purpose of the retrofit. And what you're going to see on these slides is you're going to see the kind of descriptive on the right, and you're going to see key questions I want you to focus in on. I could give you a ton more information than this, but I tried to narrow it down to what I could fit on a page. What I think if you ask these questions, you'll be way better off than kind of someone who is not asking these questions. So defining the purpose of the retrofit, just because someone on sales went and sold the retrofit and they wrote a scope letter does not mean that that scope letter is the purpose. I want to repeat that. Just because a scope letter was sold for a project does not mean that that scope is the purpose as the customer understands it. It may be the contractual scope, but what you're trying to achieve could be potentially quite different. So in this phase, we want to define, why are we doing this retrofit? Many retrofit projects are owner direct, and you're going to want to work with the project sponsor to determine why the project sponsor and ultimately their organization is pursuing the retrofit, because that is going to influence a lot. When you look at the project management triangle, right, you have quality, time, and price. That's usually the triangle, right? You can increase the amount of time if you want to increase the quality without increasing, it's a variety of different ways you can do things. I'm not going to get into the project management triangle. I'm going to go off on a tangent there. And I know for some of you that drives you bat crap crazy when I do that. So I'm going to stop myself. All right. But what we want to do is really figure out what's going on here. So why are we doing this retrofit? Why is the customer doing the retrofit? Is it mandated to hit a corporate goal? Is it mandated by regulation? Is it being executed because they've got funding for it? Is there some sort of customer who's utilizing the space and is unsatisfied? These are all things we want to understand. What will this retrofit affect? This is not just the material effect, but it's the behavioral and personal effects as well. So you can go, and I'm sure a lot of you have, implement analytics, implement guideline 36 sequences, implement all sorts of strategies. And you come back a year later and that stuff's not being used. Things are in hand. Honestly, the customer is now worse off than they were when they couldn't control anything, because now they could control stuff and really mess with it. So we really want to understand, is this going to affect how the building is operated? If so, we want to account for that in how we develop our retrofit, how we train our owner customers, how we build our graphics, what users we give, what capabilities. So oftentimes I see retrofit, it's purely people are like, okay, we're taking this chiller and we're replacing it with a BACnet enabled chiller. So we're going to need a BACnet interface. But they don't stop to think, oh, now the customer has all these different points and they had a capacity issue during the summer. How could we potentially use these points on this chiller to help them forewarn themselves of capacity issues, so that maybe they get a rental chiller or they realize there's capacity problems, variety of things. Understanding why we're doing things and what it will affect is really going to make us really stand out among our peer customer or our peer companies that we're working and competing with. So who benefits from this? This is another important thing. You need to understand who benefits and who could be impacted as well. I should have put who's impacted and who benefits. Because, for example, if you're in a hospital and you're doing retrofit in patient rooms, obviously the patient's going to benefit potentially by better control, but the nurses are going to be impacted. Maybe they have to clear out rooms. Maybe you have to work after hours. There's all sorts of variables that you need to account for. And then what business objectives does the retrofit achieve? If you understand what business objectives this retrofit's achieving and the criticality of those business objectives, this is going to help you if you run into change orders. This is going to help you if you run into project delays, etc. So, for example, if the business objective is to retrofit this school because students can't currently attend it due to environmental quality issues, then understanding that students are unable to be in the school until this is fixed is going to place an emphasis on the timeline, which is going to influence the cost of the project. So you need to understand these things. Once we've done that, then we need to decide what is needed to meet that purpose. So we talked about the purpose, but what is needed to meet that purpose? So in this phase, we're going to determine the who, the what, the how, and the when. We need to determine these items so that we can properly execute our audit. So we're going to have to understand a lot here. Now, this is not the audit yet. We haven't done the audit. I want to be clear. This is kind of pre-work. So we want to understand who will be involved in this retrofit. This includes both on the owner side, on the contractor side, and in our own internal organization. So who's going to be involved? Who do we need to cover? Who do we need to project manage? Who do we need to set up a communication plan with? All of these things. Then we need to go and we need to take a look at who will be using the system post retrofit. So who's going to use this? Like, who is going to be the end user? How are they going to be using it? When are they going to be using it? This will all affect our to-be system architecture. So right now we have an as-is architecture that we haven't audited yet, so we don't have a good sight picture on what exactly exists. And we're trying to figure out our to-be architecture so that we know kind of, okay, what should we be looking for? Because maybe they want, the customer wants to remotely operate the building. Maybe the customer wants stuff to be operated in a super simple way. Maybe they want to do energy metering. Who knows? So we need to know who's using it. Once we know who's going to be involved, who and how they're going to use the system, then we can look at what systems are being affected. It's not as difficult as you think. So if we know we're doing a chilled water plant retrofit, then we know, just doing kind of logical deduction, that we're affecting the chillers, the cooling towers, the pumps, the piping, the pressure, and the downstream systems, the air handlers with their coils, the VAV boxes, et cetera. Now, why do I say that? Because you may be like, Phil, we're only retrofitting a central utility plant. We're not affecting the air handlers. But what if the air handlers have some sort of valve averaging logic to do some form of reset at the central utility plant? What if we're doing calls for cooling and calls for cooling for trim and response, some guideline 36 stuff? Those can and will affect systems. So don't assume just because you're on an isolated system that doesn't necessarily impact other systems. Even things like going and working in a specific space with air pressure, that may affect building pressure, that may affect surrounding spaces. This is notorious in hospitals where you work on an operating room and people don't account for kind of the storage corridor in between the operating rooms and the hallways, and they don't account for that from a pressurization perspective, and then they get all sorts of pressure issues. So how are we affecting these systems? I kind of just went through that, right? And then when does this project need to be done by? Like, when do we need to accomplish this? Is it a school project that needs to be done over the summer? Is this something that needs to be done within a couple weeks? Is it like an Amazon warehouse that, they want it done yesterday? What is it? And then are there any time constraints? So do we need to do this at night? Do we need to do this in third shift? Does this need to be done only on weekends? Is there only a certain time when we can shut down power? These are all things you want to understand. Now we get into the actual auditing process, right? So in this phase, we are discovering the current as-is state of needs defined in step 2. This is where we're officially going to do the audit. I use the terms as-is and to-be quite a bit. Those are common enterprise architecture terms. So you'll hear me use as-is, to-be, and work packages. As-is the current state. To-be is the state that the system is desired to be in to meet the use cases of the stakeholders after completion of the work packages. And the work packages are the retrofit work. So now we need to start defining, who do we interview and have we interviewed them? Now, something I want to point out is you're going to have kind of 2 interviews. You're going to have a pre-interview and then you're going to have a post-interview during the audit phase. That pre-interview is going to be very much discovering the questions on this slide and this slide right here. The post-interview is going to be after we do our audit. So we're going to go and we're going to figure out, okay, maybe we need to interview the operators, an energy manager, chief sustainability officer, CNO, chief nursing officer. Maybe we need to talk with the director of IT because we're going to be doing IT architecture stuff. Figure out who we need to talk to. And the questions you want to ask them is, how do you see this project impacting you? Do you have any constraints on us working in your area? For IT folks, do you have an IT policy as far as putting things on your network, for addressing, for subnetting, for VLANs, for routing, etc.? Do you have any certificate requirements for cyber? All these things you can be asking people during the interview. How does the customer currently use the system? Now you're focusing kind of like on those tactical roles that are using the system, the energy manager, the operations manager, the dispatcher, etc. Walk me through how you currently use the system. Watch them use it, like videotape it. Grab your iPhone and videotape them doing a triage, videotape them doing a schedule, figure out how they do it. If you can, unless like how they do it is completely inefficient, like it takes 20 clicks to get to a schedule. If it's that, then, you know, from my previous podcast, the 3-click rule, right? You should be able to get to anything within 3 clicks. But setting that aside, if you're in the 3-click rule and it works, then you want to try to emulate that on your new system. That's going to reduce the time to train these people to work. So how does the customer use it? Do we have current documents? Do we have O&M documents? Do we have a retrofit log, a service log? Do we have MEP set? Do we have submittals, etc.? Have we field verified the documentation? We'll talk more about this in just a second when we get into the audit process. What is the current data? And you're going to see me use the DAT infrastructure, or the DAT acronym. And that's kind of a subset of BDAT. So in the enterprise architecture world, you have business, data, application, technology. Since we don't really have business systems, I guess you could argue BAS is a business system for operations. We're going to focus on data, application, and technology, also known as infrastructure. So what is the current data state of the system? What's online? What's offline? What's the trending intervals? What's the set points? What is the naming scheme? Do they have a naming scheme? These are all questions you want to build checklists around and ask yourself. Excuse me. What is the current application state of the system? Just because everything's online does not mean it's actually working. So does the sequence work? Do they even have a sequence? Do they have a program? Can you get the program? What are the schedules? Are all of the servers logging their data appropriately to databases? Where are they logging it? And then what is the current infrastructure state? And I like to break this into kind of 2 layers. I like to have the upper layer. That's going to be your server. That's going to be your visualization. That's going to be your database, your web server, etc. So what is that infrastructure? What does it look like? What can we reuse? What do we have to replace? Who do we have to work with on that? And then everything kind of below that, supervisory layer, field bus, field controller, IO. What is the current infrastructure state of that? And then finally, we get into the fun part of any retrofit project, which is making sure we don't get sued. We don't have horrible slippage. We don't just lose all of our executed margin on this project. We want to try to avoid those things, right? So we're going to go, and with the information we gathered, we're going to do what's called a gap analysis. And this is the gap between the as is and the to be states of the system. This gap analysis is ultimately going to determine our work packages for our retrofit along with our project constraints. So the key questions we want to focus here is, what stakeholder challenges can we identify? Are there budget, time frame, policy constraints, etc.? These are things that can really impact us. We could potentially have liquidated damages. There's a variety of risks associated with stakeholders. Maybe we can only access a specific area at a certain time. Maybe we have to do hot work because we can't shut any power down and we can't turn systems down. That's always interesting, having to go and install controls on an existing air handler that's running and then do a very quick cutover because it's a critical system. What user challenges can we identify? Are they currently challenged by gathering data, by their graphics, by their reporting, by their scheduling? What issues do they currently have that maybe we can address as long as it's in scope with the contract, or potentially a positive change order to grab us some more margin and kind of bandwidth on executing this retrofit? What gaps exist between the as-is and the to-be system? This is not an exhaustive list, but it's the big 5 that I see. Electrical, right? So maybe we have to do metering. Maybe we need to increase our electrical capacity. Maybe we have motors that don't work with VSDs. Maybe we need to electrify and we got to switch over to electric heat, but our loads on our panels are not rated to handle that draw. These are all things we need to account for. Mechanical. Maybe we got inlet vanes. Maybe we've got these big hunkin' pneumatic valves. There's all sorts of issues we could have to deal with. IT. Maybe there's no IT infrastructure. Maybe we have a very restrictive IT infrastructure and our system's been previously air gapped and it's been on its own network, or it hasn't been networked because maybe it's really old. What are our BAS gaps? Maybe we have a legacy architecture. Maybe we have legacy controllers that are no longer available even on eBay. We have to account for these. And then finally, design. This is a huge one that a lot of people miss in retrofit. They go in, they really nail the mechanical, the electrical, the IT, and the BAS, and they've got it buttoned up. They're like, these sensors don't work. This mechanical system needs to go, but they don't get a sequence of operations. They don't understand, like, how did it operate before? Maybe there were dependencies between systems in the past, and they don't account for that design. And so they have a major gap between their as-is and to-be. And then what timeline and conditional restraints exist that we must account for? I've hammered that, so I'm not going to really dive into that too much. So now we get to the nitty gritty. How do we perform a retrofit site audit? It's actually not terribly difficult. So there's basically 4 steps. Surprise, surprise. The first step is gather available documentation. What a shock, right? Then we field verify our documentation. We download any existing BAS data. This surprises a lot of people that I don't put this first. There's a reason why I don't do that first. And then we interview stakeholders again. So right here, how I've kind of written it out is what you're going to do on the left right here. And then key points I want you to focus in on right here up on the right. So on the left, what we've got is we want to gather documentation. This is going to support the rest of our audit. We're looking for the basic stuff, right? O&M manuals, operation and maintenance manuals. Every customer should get one of these after a project's completed. Sometimes they lose them. Sometimes they don't keep them up to date. Sometimes they're not given them. Still surprises me, but that does happen. Within the O&M manuals, typically there's going to be a control submittal, there's going to be MEP, so mechanical, electrical, plumbing plans, and there's going to be specifications, you hope. And there may be catalog sheets for the individual pieces of equipment and sensors and whatever. You want to gather this if possible, but you don't want to trust it. Don't trust documentation you gather. The reason why is usually if the building's even 2 years old, they can go and do a retrofit. They can do a repair replacement, and that valve is no longer accurate. That relay is no longer accurate. That controller is no longer accurate. That space that was a eating area is now a data closet. So you've got to account for these things. You've got to go and kind of think through all this stuff right here, right? I'm just going to check our audio. Okay, we're still looking good. All right. Next up, we want to get our maintenance logs. I really like this. I don't see a lot of people ask for this in retrofit audits. It surprises me that they don't. You could tell a lot by maintenance logs. An air handler that people have to repeatedly go to could signify maybe a design issue, maybe a set point issue, etc. I also like to look at retrofit logs, what was done. I really like IT policies. I like to know, am I going to be constrained to IP addresses? Do I have to pay to IP addresses to get IP addresses? Do I have to work on a single VLAN? Do I have routing constraints? Do I have cyber constraints, etc.? I like to knock those out beforehand because that will definitely impact my network architecture. And then my current DAT, right? My data application technology state. Is my data good? Is it clean? Is it reporting? Are my applications working? My software, does it work? And my technology, my servers, can I still use them? Are they, 486s? Are they one of those DOS green screens like hidden in the closet? What do I have? So key points, right? Gather documentation, but don't trust it. Check the date on the O&M and submittals and compare it to the retrofit logs. Like if you have a retrofit in 2018, but your O&Ms are 2012, I think it's reasonable to consider that the O&Ms may not be accurate. There may have been a change. So definitely do that. You can also, a little trick I like to do is I like to Google the building, right? Google the building and look for construction records. Look for permits that were pulled. This can give you an idea if something was done. Like some organizations have major churn in their operations staff and they don't know who was there. So it's not terribly difficult to go and type in, an address and a permit and see if there's a construction permit pulled for it. See if there's a retrofit permit pulled for it. Not difficult, and it can really help you kind of dodge some bullets and ensure you understand the DAT and IT policies. All right, now we got to field verify documents. So this is the fun part, right? We get to go out in the field, walk around, hopefully, have some fun. What I like to do, and it's a little different, and this is really odd when you do it the first time. Usually I only do this if the job's already booked or if I know there's a high likelihood of us winning the job. But what I like to do is take a laptop with kind of a pen stencil on it, and I like to have a template one line. So it's kind of just a ductwork or a pipe layout, template controller layout, and an empty bill of materials. And what I like to do is I go to the major systems. So you're doing this for types of systems, not every system, but for types. That's a key point. Because if you had 400 VAV boxes, you're not going to one line out every VAV box. You're probably going to only have like 3 types of VAV boxes, probably a series, a parallel, and a cooling only. Maybe you'll have a heating as well. But you got that. What you do is you draw out the one line, you lay out where the sensors are, you lay out where the IO is on the controller, and you build a bill of materials for the kind of sensors and actuators and relays, etc. And what you're doing here is you're killing 2 birds with one stone. You're going and you're creating, right, a list of parts and pieces that are out in the field. And what happens from this is as you're field verifying, you're filling this out and you're creating basically a rough submittal along with your as is state document. And this is going to be something that then you can real quickly turn into a 2B state document. It's going to save you a lot of time. It's going to give you a really good site picture of what's going on at that site. Now, what you want to do as you do this, you want to ensure all in-scope systems are accounted for, right? Anything that's in the scope, make sure it's accounted for. If you are doing a chiller retrofit and you do a site visit and there's no chiller, then something is wrong and you need to figure out why. You need to verify state and operation of inputs and outputs, mechanical, electrical, and IT systems. The last person who touched it broke it is the general rule for retrofits. So make sure that you are going and verifying exactly what the state is, usually with screenshots, so that when folks claim, oh, it worked before you touched it, you're like, no, it did not work before I touched it. Sometimes you even have to get people to sign off that it indeed does not work. Gather nameplates for all major systems. Just take a picture of the nameplate on the piece of equipment. That way, if you have to do any integration, you have an idea what the system is. We're almost there, folks. So now download existing BAS data. I like to do this after I've done the site verification because now I can say, all right, I'm at the BAS. I've built out this potential points list, and yet these points are not in the BAS. Why? If I go download BAS data and then I go out into the field, my experience, no matter how organized I tried to be, I would miss stuff. Versus if I went into the field and created my sketch and then I went to the BAS and I looked at the air handler, I was like, that's interesting. It had a VFD drive on it. And it had a cooling valve, but on the BAS, it's got no cooling valve and it's just a start stop with no VFD. What's going on here? The other way around, you tend to miss it. So what we want to do is we want to do a couple things. One, there's a high possibility in a retrofit that this is a BAS you don't know how to use. Your customer or your company doesn't support it. You can't buy it anymore. In that case, hitting Windows function print screen is your friend. It will automatically print and you can save that capture or use the snipping tool if it's a more like Windows 10. What Windows are we at nowadays? Windows 10, Windows 11, right? my gosh, it all blends together. So you'll go and use like the snipping tool or function print screen, and that will enable you to then save those documents to a Word document or save those to Paint, something where you can create a list of documents. You can also take pictures with your phone. Once you're doing this, ideally, you want to get screenshots of all graphics and current conditions for major systems. You want to grab the BAS controller points database, so set points, configuration of points, calibration, etc. Especially if you're going to reuse the IO, you want to understand the calibration. BAS user database, BAS programs, schedules, and set points. Your goal is twofold here, right? You want to prove that stuff didn't work before you touched it, and you want to have set points and data to restore the system if something goes wrong. And if you don't have these mechanical systems or sequences from the previous document collection, oftentimes if you can access the logic, you can figure out the sequence of operations. Unless it's like the old DX9100 stuff where you needed a tag file, and if you didn't have the tag file, you didn't know what points did what. Most programs, you can go and kind of figure out, just looking at the logic, what the sequence of operations is. And now, finally, we interview our stakeholders. With all this in hand, we can now go talk to the stakeholders to clear up anything that is murky. Not saying people will lie to you, but sometimes people don't know exactly what they're saying and they want to be helpful, so they say stuff that's not accurate. So having done all this field verification, you have a really good understanding so that you can ask the appropriate questions of maybe why a piece of equipment is in hand or why the device was replaced, when it was replaced. Your goal here is to clear up anything you have concerns about, verify why the documentation maybe doesn't match the field conditions, understand why any systems are overridden or in hand, and discover what has changed and why it has been changed. So that's it, folks. That is the episode. I'm going to do the utterly amazing fact. If you've ever seen any of our live presentations, you know I always do this slide. And that is that 100% of questions that are not asked during the question and answer session does not get answered. I know that's amazing. A lot of people are shocked by that fact, but it is true that if you don't ask a question, it does not get answered. I know it's amazing, but now you know that. So if you want to ask questions, I'll hang around for just a little bit and I'll answer them as I see them in the chat. I see that I can't even pronounce your YouTube name, so I'm not even going to try. But I will tell you that this will be available on YouTube as a recording. So you can watch this again and again and again till your heart's content and hopefully enjoy it. Let me see what other questions we have. I'm going to go to the regular places of YouTube, Facebook, and LinkedIn. Let's check and see what we have. Todd says, I like the slide. Seems like it's probably takes a lot more work. Not really. I drafted all this in probably about an hour, maybe less. Our chief talent officer is actually reorging some stuff in our org right now to free me up, because this is stuff I've wanted to do for a long time, is really step up the production quality of these presentations. And so I think that this will kind of really help folks to kind of learn. I want to do this. I want to do like a BAS technician fundamentals kind of thing. So there's a lot I want to add to this. Let's see. That's LinkedIn. Facebook. Let's see what's going on with Facebook. No questions there. And YouTube, I've taken care of those, so everyone is good there. Yeah, let's see. Let's go back. So any questions y'all have, I will hang for just a little bit. Do I have any videos showing lighting audits? I don't, but it wouldn't be terribly difficult to create one, to create kind of a training on lighting audits. They're not terribly difficult to do. You know, you got to get fixture count. You have to understand how it's controlled. Luminescence, you have to understand, you know, all your foot candle stuff. That will really kind of help you to understand what you have. And then kind of, you know, the old saying with lighting, You replace the ballasts. That gets you your initial savings. And then once you've replaced the ballast, then you play with the light intensity, figure out like where can you reduce light intensity without impacting occupant safety and occupant comfort. And then you work to kind of the automating of scheduling, making sure stuff's not on when it shouldn't be on, doing occupancy-based lighting control, etc. So, yeah, it's a pretty straightforward process. And then obviously you have to figure out what M and V you're going to do. A lot of people do A with lighting, but some people can do B with lighting. I talked through that kind of a little bit on Monday, I believe. A being that single variable where you just say, okay, we're only measuring the reduction of kilowatt hours or kilowatts. That's it. That's our only variable. Whereas B has multiple variables. Maybe you're looking at occupancy. Maybe you're looking at fixture count. Maybe you're looking at luminance. I cannot pronounce that word. Holy crap. You think after 402 episodes, I'd learned to speak English, but apparently not. So luminescent, not nescence. It's an ED. It's luminosity. No, luminosity. Maybe. Whatever. So the key point is it's the intensity of the light. All right. You're welcome, Jacob. I'm glad this was helpful. If you do have any questions, definitely hit us up. Retrofit is the name of the game for our courses in 2023. Retrofit sales, retrofit engineering, retrofit operations. It's where I think the market's going. It's what we're going to be either adding to our existing courses or we're going to be going and doing on future courses. And hey, Jay on YouTube, you don't have to say your last. I'll stay here and answer questions all day. It's totally cool. I do this for the industry. So I love getting questions. I was actually talking to my CTO, Chief Talent Officer, the other day, and I was telling her, she was asking me, we're trying to figure out what I like to do and what I don't like to do. And she's like, do you like doing podcasts? And I was like, I like doing podcasts when people interact. That's why I like speaking in person, because I love the collaboration and kind of consultative aspect of that. What drives me bonkers is when I talk for 30 minutes and no one asks anything, and I feel like I'm talking to a reflection of myself. Jacob, that was a great overview. Thank you, Jacob. I really appreciate that. And then Jay, your question around lighting videos available on the playlist. No, I have not done any lighting videos. We've been solely focused on BAS, but I've done a lot of lighting stuff in my previous life, so it would not be terrible. I have experience with AV, lighting, access control, video surveillance, all that stuff. So, yep. Where do I believe a good source of leads come from when considering retrofits? Great question. So it depends where you live. Like if I was living in New York right now, every commercial building becomes a potential lead for retrofits with the electrification, with the penalties, with all the things that are hitting. That is going to all be beneficial to us. So that would be like an example. Now, let's say you live in Alabama where energy is cheap and they don't have a lot of regulation. What would be a lead for retrofits? Schools. Schools are a great lead for retrofits. Going and looking at healthcare. Healthcare is a great lead for retrofits. So how do you start this conversation? Well, when you start to work in a vertical market, and that's what those are called, like healthcare is a vertical market, K through 12 is a vertical market, higher ed's a vertical market. When you've worked in verticals long enough, you start to see the same trends. So what I always try to ask myself is, how does this organization make money? Because schools make money, believe it or not. And then how do things impact that money? So oftentimes the money for a school district, not always, but oftentimes the money for a school district follows the student. And so if the student is not in the seat at the school, they get a certain less amount of money. So if there is something impacting the student being in the seat at the school, then you can go and really impact that, right? With environmental quality, with safety, et cetera. Let's say also, Jeff, that you have a scenario where was I going on this? Sorry, I was reading the chat while also talking about this. So you've got the seats in the school. Test performance. So if the environment is impacting test performance, we had Barry Cope talked about acoustics. If acoustics are bad, if lighting is bad, if environmental quality is bad, and they are not learning, and that can be proven to impact test scores, you can make an argument to potentially go and do a retrofit. So these are talking points that you learn to have with the superintendent, with the facilities director, et cetera. Hopefully that made sense, Jeff. Started a company specializing in lighting controls. While I'm strong in the technical side of things, I need help learning more aspects of the industry, kind of looking for the right path. Very happy I was shown this channel. Yeah, I definitely would look. We've done a lot of videos on sales. And the nice thing about sales is it's pretty universal across all the trades. The estimating side obviously is different, but the aspect of identifying your target vertical, understanding that vertical market's challenges, asking questions of the appropriate stakeholder, and then solidifying a beachhead in a specific market. And then, for example, maybe you establish a beachhead in improving the lighting of medical office buildings. You get enough of those, and then medical office buildings are usually part of a healthcare network. So you use that to then leap into maybe an ambulatory clinic. And then from an ambulatory clinic, maybe you leap into a kind of low-level hospital, a regional hospital. And then from there, maybe you work into a actual, level 1 trauma center. So it's that natural progression. What I don't recommend doing is being, I'm going to go after commercial real estate. I'm going to go after healthcare. I'm going to go after schools. I'm going to go after higher ed. And then you don't develop any kind of tacit, like deep knowledge of that vertical and their pains. And you also don't establish relationships with that vertical. And so therefore, because you don't have those relationships with that vertical and you don't really understand their pains, it's going to make it that much more difficult to sell in a vertical. So I hope that helps. Alrighty. So there we go. All right, seeing what's there. Okay. And by the way, like I said, folks, we're going to be at AHR February 6th to the 8th. We're going to be selling our It's the Control's Fault t-shirt. All of these sales of that are going to, like, all the proceeds, so not just profits, but all proceeds are going to go to the veterans charity ran by Gary Sinise. So definitely pick up those t-shirts if you're interested at AHR. Multiple people from our team are going to be there talking about workforce development, talking about behavioral and motivational strategies, talking about our technical skill assessment. I'm going to be teaching a session on IT networking. So it's going to be a lot of fun. So if you want to see kind of next level of talent development and workforce development and how we're taking postal workers and, hotel lobby clerks and turning them into service techs online in less than 12 weeks. Definitely hope to see you there. Check us out at booth Bravo Charlie 1824. Once again, that's booth Bravo Charlie 1824. All right. I don't see any other questions from folks. I hope you all had a ton of fun. I hope you enjoyed this. I'm going to at least try to do one presentation type podcast a week. I'm going to try. I'm at a major distributor. Yeah, go ahead, Jay. I'm at a major distributor this week to talk about just kind of collaboration, and I'm at AHR next week. So it may not happen those 2 weeks, but definitely something I'm going to aim for at least once a week. I want to ask a question. Would I happen to know where I can find mentors like myself to help your company grow? We do offer consulting on a case-by-case basis. That's more my director of business development who would answer those questions. You can definitely reach out to us at smartbuildingsacademy.com. Just hit the contact button. We do offer business consulting on a case-by-case basis. So, alrighty. Anyone else? Let's see. No. Okay. Like I said, everything will be available in about an hour at podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/402. Once again, that's podcast.smartbuildingsacademy.com/402. We may not have a podcast on Wednesday because I'm going to be traveling. It depends on if I get one recorded. So we're going to play it by ear. All right, everybody. I appreciate all of you being here. Thank you so much. And I hope you have an awesome day. Be sure to like and subscribe on YouTube. Share this with your contacts, hitting the share button on LinkedIn. Like and follow on Facebook. And if you're listening to this on iTunes, please leave us a 5-star review. That helps so much. Thank you, everybody. And I hope you have an awesome day. Take care.